Hi, welcome to CoinGeek Conversations. I'm very excited about today's guest. We'll be speaking to the director of Veridat. They are using blockchain technology to prevent fraud in the pharmaceutical industry, as well as shaping up a couple of other areas as well. Hello, Philip. How are you doing?
Good, Natalie. Thanks for having me.
You're listening to CoinGeek Conversations with Natalie Mason.
I'm so happy about the success that you've had at Veridat. So firstly, I'd like to talk to you about why the current drug system is so flawed and why it's resulting in so much fraud. In your CoinGeek Conversations presentation, you explained how the global drug consumption rests on an honor system. Can you explain that?
Sure. The basic premise here is that data, when created during your preclinical through clinical trials, needs to be complete. It needs to be honest. The FDA and other regulatory bodies, they don't necessarily test these compounds. They look at the trajectory of your data to get to this final result of from petri dish to testing it on humans, to make sure that it's safe and it can be marketed. And as you can imagine, in an industry with billions of dollars at stake, there are people who function as bad actors. But I think also more importantly is that what we've seen, especially with our pharma partner, is that it's less about being a bad actor. It's more about streamlining audit processes. We've built tools which allow basically them to grant, very, very specific access when an auditor says, something looks kind of funny here. Can we take a look at it? And they can point them to this. And if everybody is starting this process from the basic concept that I don't need you to trust me, but you can certainly trust this blockchain technology in which our data has gone through to validate the time of when something occurred, metadata that surrounds that particular trial, data that was created during it. So it's less about don't trust me, but you can really trust the data and the occurrence of it through this third-party arbiter of truth, which is us.
So do you see your work in that case being part of getting big companies to either comply or get struck off from being able to operate if they're not functioning within an honest framework?
Sure. The FDA, as their rules have evolved, especially around digital platforms, right? As you can imagine, everything used to be on paper. A lab notebook is a physical thing that is a bound lab notebook that they write in. You can't delete anything, and if you have things to add to it, this is what they would typically hand in when they were ready to jump from one stage of the process to the next. And a lot of that has changed now. There are electronic lab notebooks, which was originally started Veridat, us down the path of building Veridat. All these systems now are network connected. Things are being downloaded digitally, right? The paper printouts and stuff are becoming fewer and far between. And so the FDA has, they've modified their approach where they're saying, okay, we don't necessarily want just this printout, but now you need to give us access, on the back end. And I think as they get smarter as the evolution, in how data is created and processed and stored, they'll continue to, look at services such as ours. I do believe. I don't believe everything requires a blockchain solution, but I think in regards to things like public health and safety, it behooves them. Plus, who wants to maintain something like that? Like, it's already out there. We've got the tools to make it so you don't have to have wallets, buy crypto, things of that nature. It works with your current system. So I think the interoperability that the public blockchain offers, BSV specifically, which is who we utilize, I think they'll continue to reach out to services such as ours to get everybody on board, and they should want to. The question shouldn't be, why would I do this? The question should be, well, why wouldn't I?
Well, you'd really hope so, because it's not surprising that there's so much mistrust in big pharma, especially when we look at even some famous cases. So, for example, Johnson and Johnson. And even, say, a few years ago, they were ordered to pay, I think it's $4.7 billion in damages to 22 women who had ovarian cancer after using the signature baby powder, which, of course, has had loads of issues. And then another thing I saw is that just last year, New York State, for example, filed civil charges accusing Johnson and Johnson of insurance fraud and downplaying the risks of the opioid painkillers.
Mhm.
Now, of course, they're appealing in both cases, and the FDA sided with them, and now they're pumping out a COVID vaccine. So, I mean, just as a spectator, how is this allowed to happen, in your opinion?
I think that's a fantastic question. The Johnson and Johnson incident, is no different than tobacco. There used to be, advertisements for 4 out of 5 doctors recommend
Yeah.
Pall Mall. Like, are you kidding me right now? I mean, there were these studies, these institutes that were backed by, big tobacco, and if we had this third party, such as Veridat in there that could have ingested that information as it occurred, the general public would have known, okay, these were the actual results. These were the things that actually transpired, and not this manipulated version. And Johnson and Johnson is going to learn the hard way about that, the same way how the tobacco industry has, and same with Purdue Pharma. They knew all of these things. They had studies. The data was there. We just weren't, pertinent to it. We weren't given that level of access, and they certainly did not hand that over when they applied to market these drugs, right? So there's always going to be a fall guy, right? So the Johnson and Johnson, someone's going to get fired, I'm sure. They're going to say, don't let the actions of these people, same thing in banking, right? Wells Fargo, they got swooped up, and their people were creating savings accounts and credit cards accounts in people's names in order to hit their numbers. Somebody got fired, somebody had to step down, but the machine keeps going.
Exactly. We're not actually changing the system itself, and that's where Veridat comes in. So before we talk about exactly how companies will be using your software, what are you doing to make sure that big pharma does come on board?
We've done a handful of talks. So we've discussed with the FDA already, and their team. They've got a working group that looks at things like blockchain technology. We've spoken with industry professionals who operate in the data integrity front. So a lot of consultants who work with these pharmacy companies, who work for the contract research organizations that get a lot of the work, especially during preclinical trials. And all we can continue to do is move the conversation from why would I do this to why wouldn't I do this, and that's been our biggest thing. It's been less about selling a company to utilize our service, but selling this idea that not just from a compliance perspective, which is, of course, there's a major cost to non-compliance, and I think most companies would find like, yes, they need a data integrity, data compliance strategy, right?
Good point.
So if you're going to do it, why would you not want the best tool possible and the most cost-effective tool possible to be able to do it? And so I think as we continue to move the conversation again from why would I to why wouldn't I, it becomes incredibly clear the benefit which we bring to the table on the back of, again, Bitcoin SV's massive scaling and secure network.
Well, one thing that I took from your presentation at the CoinGeek conference was that sadly, in some of these situations, because of the money that's involved and the money that can be made, there's almost an incentive to keep this bad system going. So do you think at some point, and I know it's a global problem, but do you think at some point the law has to step in and services like Veridat will have to be a legal requirement?
Sure, people certainly get reprimanded, and I think when you think of fraud or bad actors, you have people that just outright lie, right? Johnson and Johnson and Purdue Pharma are really good examples of that. But more likely, what's occurring is that these large organizations who tend to farm out a lot of the data processing aspects of their process. So they work with maybe 4 or 5 contract research organizations at the beginning of drug development, and then those contract research organizations, or CROs, they may farm out work to 5 and 10 other parties. And everybody has an incentive, not necessarily to commit outright fraud, but that the data looks a bit better to get them to that next phase, because of course they will then get paid more money, right? And it's totally understandable. It's not to say that they're going to give them outright, misinformation, but as they clean things up. But the problem is, if you've got 5 contract research organizations that are working with 10 sub-parties, right? Subcontracting organizations, you now have 50 data providers, and nobody is talking to the other. You have a lot of these silos of information. If the contract research organization is receiving everything from the original data in its state, they can view all of those as a single unit, right? And so these outliers that they may be cleaning up are actually not outliers at all. And so that's why I feel like I certainly need to be a lot clearer about fraud, bad actors, misinformation, and just poor data practices too, which we find is likely that's really occurring. And in a perfect world, yes, we would love to be mandated, obviously, as part of that process. Whether or not we get there, if they say I know the U.S. government would never say you have to use Veridat, but as much as we would love that, people at the FDA may be watching right now, call me. I do believe that services such as ours will become more important, especially as they see their benefit. We're looking forward to, as is our pharma partner, knowing that they will no doubt run into an audit, with the work in which we're currently doing.
Goodbye are the days of long paper trails and this absolutely inefficient system across industries. Hello, blockchain, simplified systems. So to that end, how does Veridat work for businesses?
Sure. So we allow the customer to add users. So let's say somebody from the FDA comes to our pharma partner and says, the data supplied at this level, this thing looks a little wonky. We want to verify, the occurrence of it, the supporting information and metadata. Okay, no problem. They can log into our system, and they can give them very pointed access, direct access to only the pertinent information. So if it's a particular trial that may have 5 or 10 iterations on it, they can show them then the FDA is able to log in, to our system with that their username and password, and have access to that very pointed information, where they can look at the entire trail, the audit trail, showing from when the whichever scientist or tech did that very first trial. Let's say they renamed it, and so there's going to be another line item in there showing, hey, this was when they changed the name of it. And then we have all the block IDs for those as well, for every single one of those transactions that they can then click. Let's say in that third one, it finally ran all the way, and we have data from that, and a data file is created. So they also passed us where the location of that data file is, and they can also use our hash endpoint to create a hash of that data file. So if the FDA goes, cool, well, this is the 6th iteration of it, I can take the 6th iteration and I can actually upload that against utilizing our system, and it will tell me if the hashes match up. So I know, do I have the most recent version of this particular data file, or did I get a version of it in the middle, even though there's been multiple that could have been submitted after that? And so
huge.
Huge. Exactly. And we feel that's really the best part of the platform, which is, again, that audit function, to be able to open up reporting and give direct access to only the pertinent information, and they can see that audit trail.
So would each company then have this integrated into their own IT system and their own network, or do they log into a public network or onto Veridat's system? How does that side of it work?
So the basic onboarding is that after the user has created their username and password, we have a bunch of API documentation in which they use to integrate into their system. In a perfect world, the only time anybody should be logging into Veridat is when you first sign up. You're doing your integration, and if you need to give somebody access later on.
Great.
In between it, because it is integrated via RESTful API, all that information is happening in real time. They work within their systems and only their systems, and we just sit there running quietly in the background. Again, nobody's managing wallets and private and public keys. Nobody's trying to figure out, how do we fund this thing? What do we put in our taxes that we had to buy, $50,000 in, cryptocurrency? All that stuff is moot. They pay us in standard fiat terms and services. and that just allows them to move about their business as they do normal every single day. That's all the benefits of blockchain technology with none of the nuances of trying to be able to make it usable for your company.
Absolutely. And now, of course, when most people think of blockchain, we're BSV people. We understand that BSV is the way to go. But for those who maybe just look at blockchains as a huge world in itself, can you explain why BSV was the only blockchain that Veridat could work on?
Sure. When we first went down the path of Veridat, we had pharma in mind as our business partners, my business partners, excuse me. They own and operate a contract research organization. And the idea behind this was we could go the IBM route, which clearly I'm glad we didn't. They're not faring too well right now. We could have gone with a private, just standard digital ledger technology that we could say, well, we said it happened. Or we could put on their system to say, well, they said it happened. We thought if the public was really involved, it's not enough just to say a single entity or person said something happened. We wanted those transactions verified against a public blockchain. It's, just like in a Yelp review, right? If 1,000 people say that this place is fantastic, you're probably going to go, chances of it being fantastic are really high.
Exactly.
Right?
And as we said at the beginning, of all industries that need this, pharma is one of those. There's such a huge level of mistrust around people. So who better to verify it than having it on a public system? It seems the only way that something like this would work.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of that with the vaccines, right? What's in it? What actually occurred? We don't trust it. Imagine if, in March, I guess, of last year, February, March, I guess, April, I think they came out with the first iteration of it. Like, if it would have gone through that entire process to delivery today, there might be a lot less, kind of nervousness about taking this or trepidation to go get it. I think a lot of people are like, don't be stupid, trust the science. And then, they get that call or that text message and they start to go, is it safe? Like that's natural to do that, right? You're not a bad person. You're not anti-science. You just don't want to grow, a sixth finger on your right hand or, and that's totally natural. And I think with services like ours, as we start to get integrated into more companies, they're going to use this as a selling point. This is no different as, requiring or not requiring, but, the SSL certificates in the early .com days. Can you remember a time when we willingly put our credit card information or our checking account information, right, into a website that had no SSL? And then you would see when they had that giant lock on it, like, look, your shit is safe. Like, that's in essence what we're going for here. Like, it may sound gimmicky right now, but tell me if you could ever imagine entering your information into a site that didn't have, that secure socket layer in place.
I love that. So what do you think then time-wise till we're all looking at this as just part of the background and it's just the norm for this industry?
My preference would have been yesterday.
Yeah.
I think as we begin to talk a little bit more publicly and release this white paper in which we are doing with our pharma partner, I think it's going to become very clear how they are leading the charge to really show that there's a massive value to this. And it's not that they're worried about somebody coming in and committing fraud. It's really more of, we have this service that allows us to back up a ton of information, right? I mean, we're also a fail-safe for them. So not only do they have another place where this information can exist, they also have all the benefits, again, of showing this immutable chain of custody, this immutable ledger where it shows like this was the first time we ran it and this was the last one. And it could have been, 100 times they've run it, but they can at least show every single iteration of that and verify its occurrence.
Yeah, that's really, really impressive. Now, of course, as well as the pharmaceutical industry, I understand that you're expanding in other areas. What have you been looking at?
Other areas that we're looking at right now would be the diamond industry, or even gold, platinum, precious silvers. Anywhere you go to buy something and somebody could just as easily resell it, fractionalize it, maybe not even own it. And so we are looking at opportunities right now in the colored diamond market where a broker in Dubai would like to be able to show that this is the exact diamond that they have through all the certificates and verifiable information. And they can also show the provenance of ownership there. So if somebody comes to them and says, I would like to invest $25 million in this obscenely large canary yellow diamond, they can do that and know that they do actually own it, in that they can use that as their proof of ownership. So that if they ever said, hey, I need you to send this to me, and they said, well, we don't have it, you don't own it, they can always point to it and say, yeah, I do. And that's that. So that industry looks really interesting right now. Another one is in the investment advisor industry. We have another partner here in Northwest Ohio that is building some tools for investment advisors as far as their portfolio goes, to be able to show the provenance of adjustments that they make in their investment strategy, to show when things were approved and when they were not approved. So that's very early in its infancy right now. And then lastly, gaming. This is how my business partners and I originally got synced up together, is because we were looking at blockchain technology as a means of verifying fair gameplay in competitive games, such as esports, or in our case, we do competitive blackjack as one of our titles. If we can show our a person who plays our game, where in an industry such as gaming, it's very easy to say, I got cheated, you stole from me, blah, blah, you name it, right? We can say, well, actually, we can show you the provenance of, this is when your deck was created, this is exactly how you played, this is what your competitor also received, showing that the decks were identical, and how they played. And so there's no more of this like, you cheated, this was a bot. It's like, actually, these are real people. We can verify when they created their accounts. They passed all of our AML and KYC checks and geo-compliance. So it allows us to verify that these are people. They are playing, their cards, they got a fair shake in our particular game. And we'll add this to our platform for other competitive gaming companies that want to, provide that same level of trust.
That comes across as the common thread here is trust. That's exactly what I was going to say, actually, because a lot of people would look and say, okay, someone who's worked in gaming and now a jump to pharma, how does that kind of work? So do you see trust as the common thread there? What made you make the jump?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we refer to Veridat as a TaaS product. So it's a trust as a service product. And that's really what we're doing here. We are all about data integrity. We're here to show that, again, these things occurred when they occurred, in the pertinent data that was, derived from those occurrences. And trust is something that we willingly just kind of offer in a lot of areas in our lives, and gaming is certainly one of them. And that's why you see a lot of I got cheated in app store reviews and things like that. Right now, Skills, SKILLZ, they just did an IPO via a SPAC, $3+ billion valuation. They have multiple lawsuits of people suing them saying they've been cheated, and they can prove that they've been cheated. Like, imagine if Skills had our service in there. They could say, well, actually, we could show you this is why you were not cheated. Instead, this is going to get dragged through the mud with lawyers and everything else. And I don't even want to think about the costs that they're going to incur, not to mention the public damage that you get. People are going to be less inclined to want to play on that platform if there is a very real concern that they're going to put their $20 in and a bot is going to, run them over.
So I guess, as you said earlier, it just becomes a case of, why would you not do this? This is like, there's literally no negatives to coming onto a system like this if you're honest and you want fair business to continue.
Exactly. It's too cheap. It's incredibly cost effective. It's fast and scalable, again, and completely secure. I mean, it's an insurance policy that just keeps on giving.
Huge. So I'm understanding that you're not able to mention who your former partner is at the moment. Hopefully we can pick up this conversation again in the near future and pick back up and hear about some of the exciting things that you've got cooking.
Absolutely, and cannot wait to share the good news, not just, again, within the blockchain community, which has been incredibly supportive of the work that we've been doing, but also in the pharmaceutical industry. It's one thing to yell into the echo chamber, that is people who understand the value of this technology, but when you do get that tip of the hat, that nod of approval from a partner who is as large as ours is. It shows that this technology has very real legs and will serve a major purpose.
absolutely an honor talking to you again. Another hero in the space. Really appreciate your time. Cool. Thank you.
Please do share the video and hit that subscribe button. Charles Miller will be back next week with Luke Rohinaz. Tonic Pow are launching an advertising platform powered by Bitcoin, and it should be a great episode. That's it from me, Natalie Mason. See you soon. Welcome to the new world of esports on the blockchain. The game-changing experience unconstrained by anything but our imagination. Create games without limits on the only blockchain without limits. Revolutionize esports with the massive scaling power of the Bitcoin SV blockchain. Imagine building the best and most popular esports title. Create a virtual universe built on game integrity, seamless access to data and player insights, and the metaverse. Build gaming worlds for the lowest cost and fastest microtransactions for in-game items and tokens. Make pro features accessible to all and easily host more prize tournaments. Get new revenue streams for game developers. When it comes to games, the only platform that's stable and scalable is Bitcoin SV. Discover how you can start building the next generation of esports games.